Good evening. My name is Rachel Hale, and I am the Executive Director for Texas Freedom Coalition. Tonight, we are going to be discussing exposing the triple threat in Texas schools. We have all seen the headlines and know our children are at the forefront of the battle. However, this did not just happen overnight. In fact, what we are seeing is actually deeply rooted in progressive education that goes back to John Dewey and Edward Thorndike in 1898. They believed that if you manipulate the psychological aspects of learning, you can therefore manipulate the child. Dewey actually said, anyone who has begun to think places some portion of the world in jeopardy. So how is this being done? It's being done through indoctrination. You've got the LGBTQ plus, development, equity, social justice, surveys, mental health, anti-racism, just to name a few. Tonight, we will unpack what this looks like in the public education classroom. We'll identify the greatest threats to our children's education and share evidence we have gathered from across Texas public schools. The hidden dangers of SEL, which is social emotional learning, will be exposed. How mental health has become a billion-dollar business in public schools, being propped up by special interest groups and supported by our Texas legislators. At the end, I will give you practical tools that you can use to protect your children starting immediately. This is the cycle of indoctrination. First, it begins with the in-class surveys. The data is then interpreted through the lens of equity, not equality, but equity. The results are stored in a statewide longitudinal data system where they create psychological profiles of our students. The fourth cycle requires changes be made to the school culture. This is done through our teachers and our school counselors. The final phase, students are radicalized by this new culture. Through the programming, they in turn turn our children into social justice activists. Most school districts are wanting to blame COVID shutdowns as the cause for learning loss and drastic decline in our schools. However, as you can see, prior to COVID, Texas ranked 35th out of the 50 states. COVID and shutdowns relaxed the Texas education standard and provided ways for schools to innovate and bypass set standards, resulting in the decline of academic rigor and student proficiency. Texas was once looked upon for its local and independent control of schools in the state. However, they are now being overrun with federal interference, which leads to strings attached for that federal money. This is the results, the star results for Prosper ISD, and you can see that every one of them has declined from 2019 to 2021 for the meets grade level and the master's grade level. This is Henderson ISD, my school district. And as you can see, we've taken a drastic drop across the board as well from 2019 to 2021. TEA's website actually, now they're calling this the Texas Academic Performance Report. However, it was previously known as Academic Excellence Indicator System. Texas spent $32 billion at the state level in 2020 on education, plus all the local funding for each district. A normal year of funding in Texas breaks down like this. They get approximately 35% from the state, approximately 55% from local taxes. Federal funds accounts for 8 to 10%, and then they get miscellaneous grants and other funding. As you can see, the majority comes up from the local level. That is why local engagement is so critical to fight this battle. This next graph is the reading language arts. And it is important because it shows, although it shows modest gains, if you will notice, they are continually manipulating the numbers as to what meets, approaches, does not meet, etc. So how reliable are these tests and these numbers? Despite billions of dollars being thrown into our schools, half of Texas school children do not meet grade level in reading and language arts. This next graph is the math version. 60% of Texas public schools do not meet grade level in math. This is alarming. Research shows that kids who do not meet grade level for more than 2 years are not likely to ever catch up, especially in math. This leads us to the triple threat. What exactly is the triple threat? It is critical sex and gender theory, critical race theory, and transformative SEL, which is essentially a critical psychosocial approach to self-awareness and cognitive behavior change. Schools are basically practicing psychiatry without a license. So it begs the question, they're not getting education right, and that's their wheelhouse. Why would anyone trust their child's mental health to the school system? Sex and gender theory. This defies biological science and replaces it with fluidity and anything goes. This results in children suffering sexually, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. This is brought into the schools through comprehensive sex ed and the sexually explicit books. Although comprehensive sex ed is not the standard for education code or teaching standards here in Texas, this sexually charged content is still seeping into our Texas schools through books, art lessons, student clubs such as the Gay Straight Alliance. And then we are also seeing across the nation an increase in student on student sexual assault. And then, of course, we're gonna dive in more on the critical race theory, and then obviously social emotional learning here in a moment. So again, they're advancing a different worldview with the sex and gender theory and promoting a child's right, yes, I said right, to sex and pleasure. That's what the left is calling it, that you are denying them their right. Okay, I do want to warn if there are any children in the room that you ask them to step away for just a moment, because I am going to show you some graphic books that are in the public school libraries all across Texas. You've got genderqueer, Lawn Boy, which a lot of schools have actually taken Lawn Boy out. What Girls Are Made Of. These graphic novels are super huge, probably because the majority of our kids can't read. So they are really ramping up these graphic novels. Let me say one more thing real quick on the obscene books. And later on, I'm going to have an action point for you. We need to ensure that our Texas legislators close a loophole that Texas currently has. Texas currently has an obscenity exemption, which essentially means that schools, librarians, and teachers are allowed to show these books in their class, use them in lessons, etc., make them readily available to children, all under the guise of education. However, if you or I took these books out in public and showed a child, we would be arrested. So we do want to urge you to get with your legislators and ask them to repeal the obscenity exemption. Okay, this is a perfect example of how critical theories are being driven into every area of education. These are art examples from Prosper ISD. They are literally grooming children, guiding them from tolerance into acceptance and from acceptance to celebration. If you disagree, you are silenced or canceled, regardless if this is contradicts your moral or religious views or the fact that they're not age appropriate. Dismantling the system. We are assigning guilt and placing blame strictly based on immutable characteristics. Ironically, they're claiming to fight racism with racism. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, promotes the lens that skin color creates inequity. There's a lack of access to educational opportunities, so proponents seek to level the playing field and create equity or equal outcomes. an example of this, Belton ISD has removed their top tier grading for high schoolers, and they're only going to keep in the top 10% because college admissions are still based on that. But every other part of the grading system is going away because that's not fair for somebody to not be up. Ibram Kendi is known for all of being almost like the father of critical race theory, if you will. He says the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. They are telling us exactly what they think. They make it very, very clear, but we're not listening. Critical race theory goes against everything Martin Luther King Jr. fought for. We are no longer judging one by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. Children are being taught that America is systemically racist, and history is literally being rewritten. Social emotional learning teachers are being trained to become the most trusted adult in a child's life, while often undermining the parental authority. These are some books that are also found in Texas libraries. This just shows that they're advancing the social justice. Heather Has Two Mommies, the books of pronouns, and then of course here's one of Ibram Kendi's books stamped for kids: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, The Hate You Give. Teachers are probing our children about sensitive personal matters in order to shape their attitudes, values, and beliefs, not to mention the data collection and privacy issues, which makes social emotional learning an intrusive nightmare. This is an AP class for ninth graders, and critical race theory literally holds our children responsible for historical, social, political, and racial transgressions. They emphasize being a victim and helplessness rather than celebrating overcoming adversity and finding success. Here we see the oppressor and the oppressed mentality. This is an example of a school-wide student-run broadcast journalism segment highlighting systemic racism and Black Lives Matter. Despite our current state laws, children are still being allowed to be used as social activist pawns. Teachers wear Black Lives Matter buttons and t-shirts on social media feeds and have posters and flags in their classroom. House Bill 3979 passed, prohibiting this, but there is no law enforcement mechanism to hold our schools accountable. Now, obviously, there are some really great teachers out there. Not all teachers are bad. However, this is how a culturally responsive teacher would teach this lesson versus just the normal teacher teaching this math lesson. Johnny was on the way to an amusement park with his mom and dad. The park was a total of 50 miles away. They already drove 20 miles. How many more miles do they need to drive? So a normal teacher would say, okay, guys, this is a subtraction problem. We're going to take 50 minus 20, blah, blah, blah. A culturally responsive teacher would respond, okay, guys, before we get to this math problem, I want to see by a raise of hands how many of you have been to an amusement park. The students raise their hand. Oh, well, it looks like maybe only half of you have been to an amusement park. Well, what are some reasons that maybe you that didn't raise your hand haven't been to an amusement park? And they might say things like, I'm scared of heights, or I would throw up, or, something like that. Because keep in mind, this is second grade level. And so she keeps probing them until one of the students finally says, well, I can't afford to go. Oh, you can't afford to go? Well, class, this isn't fair that so-and-so can't go to the amusement park. So what are some ways that we could make this fair so everyone has an opportunity to go? So a kid might say, oh, let's make it free or something like that. Oh, yes, that's a great idea. Then she goes even further to say, well, in this scenario, they have a mom and a dad, but not all families have a mom and a dad. What are some ways that families are different? And someone might say, well, I have a mom, a dad, and a stepmom, and I live with my grandparents, or whatever the case may be. And then she keeps probing until one says, well, down the street, so and so has two mommies. Oh, yes, two mommies. Well, some people have two daddies. And this is how they manipulate and get into the lessons in our classrooms. Okay, this is actually post from a Frisco ISD teacher that presented this nationally to other teachers, pushing them to have these books in their library. And if you notice the last slide, she talks about librarians are the gatekeepers. This may be a cute image, however, there is nothing cute about SEL. According to Castle, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, SEL is for adults and students, and educators have fallen hook, line, and sinker for this farce based on the Hegelian dialect, which is a philosophical idea proposed by Hegel that you must create a problem so you can provide a solution. And that's exactly what we have seen. They have pumped in nationwide $190 billion to school districts under the guise of COVID relief funds. Texas alone received $20 billion funds, only second behind California. To date, this is the largest federal education bailout in our nation's history. The problem with social emotional learning is it's literally like nailing jello to the wall. It was seen first in critical race theory. Critical race theory is nothing more than the vehicle to social emotional learning. There's a growing alarm among legitimate psychologists who see this as a cognitive behavior therapy, created a situation in which teachers and school counselors are practicing medicine without a license. They are sounding the alarm about the content, effects, and dangers of these practices in school. All social emotional learning is transformative. The word transformative is code for Marxist. All social emotional learning is negative. There is no good SEL. It is all an attempt, again, to shape your children's attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors. This is rooted in the movement to create international children, which is the goal is to ultimately separate children from their parents. If SEL were a tree, it is one that could not bear good fruit. All of this adds up to well-funded marketing manipulation of schools, administrations, families, and legislators. SEL will definitely replace academic learning, and kids' minds and hearts are being shaped by it. Education is big business, and our children are a captive market. So if you notice here, these 5 competencies are what Castle uses to define social emotional learning. And if you look, parents and families and caregivers are the third ring from our children. They have classrooms and SEL instruction, classroom climate. Our teachers, our schools are the first 2 lines of next to our children outside of parents. So when they say self-awareness, what they really mean is that you're to embrace your identity, act on emotion, deconstruct gender norms, explore feelings, and redefine your own self-proclaimed identity. Accept critical lens on race and gender, celebrate vices, and suppress virtue. When they say self-management, what they really mean is to practice social emotional conditioning, artificially neutralize the psychological and emotional reaction to stress, trauma, and loss. Responsible decision making really means applying a critical lens to age and behavior. They want to defy age and development capacity, i.e., bring in the sexually inappropriate and explicit books, indulge the will with informed consent, exercise radical individual autonomy. Again, we need to get away from our parents' ideals in our culture, and this is the opposite of self government. When they talk about social awareness, they really want you to become an activist. They want you to confess your oppression or your privilege, coerce allyship to support or hate, empathy measured by degree of activism, disrupt and dismantle. Relationship skills really means replace your parents and family. Build relationships with adults at school. Trusted allies. Trust them more than you trust your parents and your family. They do this through trauma bonding. Tolerate and indulge all becomes the highest social virtue. So we want equality. They want equity. We want equal access to opportunity. Social emotional learning advocates want equal outcomes for everyone. Individual liberty over collectivism. You'll see the word collectivism, they do a lot of groupthink, group projects. You're graded as a group. Human dignity versus identity politics. Logic, reason, and flourishing versus critical lens and deconstructing. Again, they are shaping the values of our children, but this is really, that's the purview of the family. It's our job as parents and grandparents to teach our children what to think, feel, believe, and how to act. That is not the job of a government school. The great sellout, selling SEL to schools and parents. Most parents have no idea what social emotional learning is or how detrimental it actually is to their child because they're told things like, oh, it's going to help our kids set goals and work towards achieving them. Approaches challenges in a positive and optimistic way. Well, I'm personally a glass is half full kind of girl versus half empty. So who wouldn't want these attributes being taught to their children? Believe in themselves and their abilities. Of course, as parents, we tell our children, you can be anything you want to be, just put your mind to it. Navigate social situations. Obviously, this is even more important this day and age with technology and social media, and definitely it's different from when I grew up. And so it is hard for parents to navigate this, let alone the children. Prepare to be an active, informed citizen. Of course, we want our children to be informed and go out and vote and things like that and be a responsible citizen. We want our kids to stand up for what is right and to stand up for people. But this isn't what they mean. This isn't what social emotional learning is teaching. However, it is showing that 81 to 93% want these different related skills for their children. In fact, 80% of parents said that they want social and emotional learning in their schools. But again, this begs the question, they don't understand. They are literally being manipulated through marketing and everything else. So why exactly is social emotional learning so dangerous? First of all, they give them daily, yes, daily mental health checks. They use guided imagery and mindfulness, student surveillance. Yes, they are tracking your students through their Chromebooks or their iPads. They're tracking the data that they're collecting from your students, reporting these to third-party um, companies, and then ultimately they're undermining our parental authority. Social emotional learning is not positive therapy, despite what they say. It literally deconstructs their identity and uses psychological intervention to rebuild children with their approved sets of attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs. It is unethical to use psychology in this way, yet our schools are actively doing this. This is an actual assignment from a school here in Texas, and the organization is called Second Step. This is the curriculum. And you see they want you to reflect on all the aspects of your identity. For each unlabeled bubble, choose a new kind of aspect, add more aspects or decoration. Then possible aspects over here, your ability, skills, your interest. But then it says your relationships, your race, your culture, your family background, your gender, your personality. So they're bringing in, oh, here you need to talk about your race and putting that at the forefront of the kids' minds, or your gender, and opening the can of worms, for there to be more than one gender, or two genders, excuse me, which we know is not the case. Okay, I'm going to let you watch this. This does not have any words, but if you will just watch it real quick. Okay, again, that is part of an actual lesson. It's the curriculum is called Capturing Kids' Hearts, and it's a social emotional learning curriculum. Students are going to be shown this video, then they're asked to discuss the characters' emotions, and then ultimately their emotions. How did they feel as they watched this video? This is an example of them trying to build trust and trauma bonding with your child. This is a dangerous practice to allow strangers to have this kind of emotional access to your children. This is actually from, it's called Character Strong, and this is the social emotional curriculum, or one of them, that my school district is using. And it uses, as you can see, it uses guided imagery. However, the VA hospital has said that guided imagery is not advised, or it should be used with extreme care for individuals who have psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, delirium, dementia, religious beliefs that might be in conflict with the use of imagery, or a history of unprocessed trauma that might come up during the session. So if the VA is saying that this is so dangerous, why is this in curriculum in school? This is an actual video, again, from Second Step. It's activist training, and this stands in direct contrast with Senate Bill 3, which banned the tenets of critical race theory and engaging in political activism for class credit. Another lesson here, it's talking about, attitudes and behaviors, power and privilege again. And then it defines what power and privilege is, that sometimes people experience privilege based on their race, gender, class, popularity, or physical power in a situation. People often don't stand up to those with more power. This one is create a plan for disrupting factors that contribute to bullying and harassment. Here you see the fist, where they're teaching them to be activists. What's your message? What will your tagline be? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, these posters have been found throughout Texas schools in hallways and bathrooms. They are informing students about mental health conditions. The QR codes allow students to go to a third-party website, referring them to counselors. They can confidentially chat or text with people to ask for help for mental services. These are often coordinated through school counselors or district student service coordinators. Again, all of this is happening without parents' knowledge. This is an example of a self-monitoring card. Did I put my best effort? Did I complete my work? Did I make good choices? Did I support my classmates? Again, this all sounds like good things that you want your child to do. However, it leads to this. Okay, this is a survey in a math class. Again, we're to teach math. That's why we're sending our kids for these core subjects, math, reading, writing. But yet in this math class, their daily check-in was, how are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10? What emotions are causing you to feel this way? Are you stressed, anxious, excited, nervous, worried, angry, upset, hurt, depressed, confused, optimistic, proud, happy, calm, etc.? And then, is there anything that you want me to know about you and your well-being today? Students are increasingly being assigned or directed to take these daily mental health checks, either digitally or on paper in the lower grades. They are often delivered through their Google Classroom or apps such as Rhythm and digital surveys and analytical tools like Panorama, K through 12 Insights, and others. They are creating dashboards and essentially giving your students behavioral scorecards. This is showing counselor concealment of student info in Keller ISD. The counselors are literally hiding things from parents, and they're wanting to be there have been counselors that have gone and gotten children on birth control. I highly recommend that you check out this website, courageisahabit.org. They do phenomenal work and really break down social emotional learning. The ASCA, which is the American School Counselor Association School Counselor Conference in 2022, they went undercover, and they've got numerous videos on there of them standing up and teaching this ridiculous stuff to school counselors. So the teachers are to change the culture in the classroom. The school counselors, which were once called guidance counselors and helped us navigate, your path and what you were ultimately going to do once you graduated, they're now calling themselves school counselors, and the goal is to literally set the tone for the school culture. So in their position statement, they say it is an expectation, not the exception, for school counselors to integrate multiculturalism and social justice perspectives into their work as advocates and leaders. So some of the breakout sessions they had was anti-racism starts with us, become an LGBTQ inclusive school, equity in action through systemic change, support transgender and gender expansive students, anti-racism perspectives, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, town hall, etc. Okay, we all know that U.S. Attorney Merrick Garland literally weaponized the DOJ, the FBI, against parents for coming to school board meetings. Well, come to find out, his daughter, Rebecca Garland, is married to Mr. Tanner, who is the founder of Panorama. And I just spoke about Panorama and how it is being used to store data and analyze data on our children. Okay, so they say that we need social emotional learning because we need to figure out about children's emotions and behaviors. We already had systems in place, such as multi-tiered levels of services. And theoretically, 5% at the top is where the individualized interventions and things come from. But what they're doing is level one, they're literally surveying all children, and they're trying to funnel all of these children in to where they're needing these specialized services. They are getting extra money. The school districts get extra money for getting these children into services, and so they're literally treating this as everyone has a problem, rather than we'll test you once something kind of comes up. They're just immediately doing these universal treatment protocols. Texas Education Agency, they have school mental health practice guide and toolkit. And they talk about the tier one universal broad mental health, behavioral health related activities, including promotion and prevention that are selected and implemented to meet the needs of all students. Again, they are wanting to test all of our students and not just the ones that actually need interventions. So why would a school need to collect data like this unless it was for the purpose of intervention? These are universal basic screening devices or psychological exams or tests to determine academic, emotional, and social interventions. There is a deep concern that this may lead to school-based health referrals for mental health and services, and the potential is there for them to start medicating our children through school. This is extremely dangerous and violates a federal law called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. This law strictly forbids the delivery of such instruments to minors without express, written, informed parental consent. Parents need to be aware of the laws and hold their districts accountable to following it. Kids are constantly being barraged with messages about suicide, depression, anxiety. And so we are literally creating these elements in our children by constantly questioning them about it and asking them if they're having these thoughts that may have never been on their radar before. Okay, so where is transformative SEL headed? This is the whole child, whole community school. This is a virtual tour that you can do on the CDC website. So they're literally talking about breaking down the whole school, whole child, whole community, what the 10 tenets are. They want to do health education, physical nutrition, health services, counseling, psychological, social services, social and emotional climate, physical environment, etc. They say they want family engagement. However, I don't think they truly want that. So this is just a typical, gymnasium. You've got the counselor's office. You've got a classroom. Over here, you see the healthy behaviors, and you see a score. This is very similar to an ESG score, which is the China's emotional social governance score. And this is where, they're leading us to go as well. Okay, so I don't know about y'all, but there wasn't a school that I went to that actually had a health center in it with exam tables. But this is where we are headed, because they are under the guise of, oh, mom and dad, don't worry, you don't have to leave work early. We'll just send them down the hallway and they can go to the doctor here. We'll keep all of their records for you. You don't have to worry about anything. So Planned Parenthood announced a partnership with a California school district to put well centers in their schools. So we typically think, oh, well, of course, that's California. However, Fort Worth has been federally funded to start and expand comprehensive sex ed programming in school-based health clinics by the CDC from grant funds back in 2012. And actually, the program that launched in Fort Worth, the pilot program, has been exported to California, Washington, and other districts in Texas. So this is happening here. So who's behind SEL? SEL began back in the 1990s with Castle. And then, of course, you've got partners like Allstate, the foundation partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg, that's the Facebook people. Fetzer Institute, I highly recommend you look them up, dig into them, and see what all they're about. Again, this has grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry. So this report and its findings were made possible by the support of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Castle. SEL market to become a $465 billion market. In 2020, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave $1.675 million to Castle. Okay, here we're talking about Panorama again, who the U.S. Attorney Garland's son-in-law owns, and then Rhythm. Panorama provides a battery of psycho-social emotional question banks for student surveillance. It is compatible with just about any delivery vehicle a school might use. Rhythm collects daily mental health data on students through an app on their phone or through their Chromebooks or iPads. They enter in these emojis in response to the questions about their emotions, feelings, and social status. We're actually working on a case right now with a parent in Louisville ISD whose school district uses Rhythm. The kids were given a survey right before lunch asking them if they were hungry. Well, so the kid did a sad face because it was right before lunch and he was hungry. Well, so the next day they get the same questionnaire, and again, he does a sad face because, again, it's right before lunch. Well, the third day that this happened, it triggered a response to the administration, who in turn ended up calling CPS on this mother. Psychologist Dr. Laura Sanger said that they are funneling students into mental health services, and the apps like Rhythm seem like a bait to entrap students into the mental health system. Okay, so what is ESSER? Again, ESSER is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. This is the federal COVID relief funding for school. The U.S. got $190 billion. Texas got $20 billion. A district's allocation was based on their Title I free and reduced lunch program for kids from low-income housing. Okay, so there's actually three parts to ESSER. There's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3, and then there's a supplemental. The federal funds were approved by Congress and granted to the state education agencies. So that's like the Texas Education Agency. They're the ones that disperse the grant money. Plano ISD received a total of $66 million. Frisco, $46 million. Henderson ISD, again, where I'm located, we received $8.7 million. We have a student population of about 3,200 students. ESSER 3 is really important because the string attached to ESSER 3 was that 20% of the money. So 20% of this $5.6 million has to go to social emotional learning. So when your school district says, oh, we don't have social emotional learning, they are lying, because if they took federal funds, they had this federal strings attached to ESSER 3 that they have to have social emotional learning. Our schools are so flush with local, state, and federal funds right now, they actually can't even spend it all. So what are they going to use it for? Okay. Another thing with social emotional learning, is all of the tests, the research shows that it is flimsy and it does not meet the minimum standard of rigor required for serious consideration. It hasn't proven to do anything that they claim it does. Whereas the other interventions that were in place, the RTI and the PBIEM or something like that, those were proven to work and to be successful. But yet we're throwing tons of money while we're literally mentally abusing our children for something that's never going to work. Okay, so this graphic represents a preliminary study of the SEL industry, which spans the globe. There are venture capitalists, investment banking firms, strategy consulting firms, nonprofits, philanthropy foundations, and educational tech companies for profit. The common theme is money and is psychologically defined categories of character, mindset, behaviors, and other social emotional learning to push this global socioeconomic policies. And as you can see, CASTLE is the nucleus of all of this. All social emotional learning curriculum comes from CASTLE. It's all CASTLE approved. CASTLE's based out of Chicago, and all of it stems down through them. This heavily funded network surrounding CASTLE and the progressive left's effort. First, you've got globalism, which is led by the World Economic Forum. This effort integrates all industries of government, representing an interwoven network with an ulterior motive. The top funders of CASTLE roughly fall into these three categories: businesses, international organizations, civil society, global leaders to help transform global political, economic, and social ideas. You've got over here on the transhuman side, again, the Fetzer Institute, Chan Zuckerberg. This is the transformation of humanity through artificial intelligence, data mining, and technology, all for the betterment of man and to maximize human potential. Down here, you've got Big Pharma. The founder of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation was the son of the president of Johnson & Johnson Company, supporting the promotion of research, policies, and practices focused on health and health care. All three categories have a vested interest in this new global socioeconomic policy, in which our children in public education are the commodity to be manipulated, managed, and controlled. The globalists can only reach their goals if we sacrifice our children. The World Economic Forum identified 14 technologies to be deployed for SEL, which rely on digital AI to gather info on our children. The data will be used to improve algorithms for AI. Mental health is now the focus, especially after the tragedy in Uvalde. We are going to see a huge mental health push, especially this next legislative session. This opens the doors for misdiagnosis and more medicines being prescribed to our children. They are literally affecting every level. They're affecting school through the collaborative distribution initiative, state level through the collaborating state initiative, which is embedded with our state education agencies. The federal level through the U.S. Department of Ed, congressional briefings, and National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development. These all advance the progressive left-leaning anti-American policies such as open borders, climate change, reproductive justice, LGBTQ, racial equity, etc. Keep in mind that no citizen voted or even debated these social agenda policies that our government and these institutions are aggressively funding. The World Economic Forum, they have an education sector as a whole needs to be reset to what they call Education 4.0. This means changing the content of education so it is much more relevant to the 21st century and changing the delivery methods to online and digital learning. Okay, so what can you do as a parent? First and foremost, withdraw your child from public school. Public school is broken. It is not the same when we were children. And I know that it's scary. I graduated from public school. My husband, our daughter graduated from public school. And last year I pulled my freshman at Christmas. And I'm telling you, the hardest part is ripping the Band-Aid off, but you can do it. You are going to have your child's best interest at heart over anyone else. No one's going to walk out in front of a bus for your child except for you. Know your rights. Again, the Pupil Protection Act. Don't allow your child to be a test dummy. That's exactly what they're doing to our children. They're testing out all of these strategies on our children. Opt your children, if they're going to stay in public school, you want to opt them out of every survey, all social emotional learning, any school counseling, you want to opt them out of everything. Submit public information requests for social emotional content, activities, videos. By law, you're allowed to go see the curriculum. However, they're getting a lot of this in through what they call supplementals. And a lot of times they don't show you the supplementals because by law, it's not part of the curriculum. So you want to ask for those supplementals as well. There's a grievance process. It's 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3. You can use that to help hold your schools accountable. Take back your schools, run for office, get on your SHAC. That's extremely important. The SHAC is your school health advisory council, and it has to be by law predominantly made up of more parents than staff. So get on that. That's where all the comprehensive sex ed and things like that are going to be coming through. So you'll have a huge influence there. Oh, let me back up real quick on that. The PPRA, the Protection of Pupil Rights and Amendment, again, that's the federal law, and it prohibits asking minor children sensitive questions about their feelings, risk behaviors, close family relationships, and much more. Oftentimes I hear, oh, thank goodness my kids have graduated. Well, if you're living in a community, you're a taxpayer, and so you're still funding this mess, and we need you. You have a voice, and as a taxpayer, you still have a right to see what's going on. Tell your other friends and family what you've learned. Encourage other parents to opt out of the surveys if they have to keep their kids in public ed. Make phone calls, emails, write letters to your elected representatives. Volunteer, be a volunteer in the school or a substitute. See what actually is going on. Ensure transparency and accountability. Please attend a local school board meeting. It's 1 meeting a month, usually, unless they have a special meeting, for 1 hour. You can please sit through 1 meeting once a month and just hear with your own ears what they're promoting, what they're passing, how the money is being spent, etc. Okay. Finally, remember that we as parents, we do not partner with the government. We are the ultimate authority over our children, period. And we need to reclaim and exercise our God-given right. Okay, this next legislative session begins January 2023. Please follow and like Texas Education 911. They have a website. They are going to be tackling these legislative priorities. The ones with stars beside them they align with the Republican Party of Texas legislative priorities for this 88th session. We want to ensure that parents are the primary and final authority in all matters. Schools will be fully transparent with parents regarding everything, even those supplementals and things like that, all the surveys. Establish consequences for districts and their employees who violate parental rights. Again, we are seeing that we've got a lot of good laws already on the books. However, there's no enforcement mechanism. We've got to have some teeth in this legislation. Repeal the obscenity exemption. We talked about that earlier in the Texas Penal Code. This is very, very important. And I think a way to help get this sexually inappropriate material out of minors' hands. Only biological sex will be recognized. Again, there's such a push for, I don't even know how many genders they're claiming now. So we definitely want to speak truth to our children. We're lying to our children. We know that there are only 2 genders, and we need to recognize that. Please spread the word. It's time that we stand up and reclaim this Texas education. And I appreciate you listening to this. Check out Texas Freedom Coalition website. If you want us to come speak, just let us know. We would love to help you in your community. We need to get this message spread far and wide. Thank you. God bless.